Oh, are you holding down the fort or is that a fake background? Oh, you were the first. Well, there you go. Write that in your journal.
I'm in the office too. They took mine too. It was kind of weird.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm going to work on deaf-blind Finn today.
Keep y'all safe.
Yep. And then they gave me this nice green band.
Oh, cool.
That I get to carry around with me all day.
Oh, you're supposed to wear it? Yeah. So you don't get free drinks with it or anything?
Yeah, this is the proof that you've been tested, that you're fever free. So these will be fun to carry around.
So it doesn't mean you get free drinks or anything?
No.
Darn it.
I wanted to ask the lady if I was going to work, if I was going to the nightclub.
Okay.
Hey, I'm a little bit concerned that Bert and Marvin are not social distancing. They look like they're both at the Golden Gate Bridge together.
Uh-oh.
I wish.
I'm a little concerned.
Be nice to have a vacation.
I think I'm on one side of the bridge and he's on the other, so I think we're good.
I think you're right. Only had 3 options and I didn't look good in the grass, and the moon shot made me look like I was somewhere in a dark place. So this was bright and shiny, so that's why I selected it.
I just had to throw that out there.
Appreciate it.
A good one.
Once again, Rebecca says, thank goodness he's not in charge anymore.
Actually, Mike, I was going to let you know, I'm going to have to leave a little bit early since you're past chair. If you could just step up into that position. I think I helped you out last year a couple times.
I believe you have a person coming in to be the chair, right? You got to learn to delegate down to the next person.
Heath can handle it.
There you go.
I thought it'd be good to see you though, Mike. It's been a while since we've got to see you run a meeting, so I thought it'd just be a good, throwback Tuesday.
Nope. We survived a year with me running the meetings. That was enough. Although I'm not real sure with Rebecca. I mean, we ended up with the pandemic by the time she was done.
Holy cow, it's been a year. I think it's been, like a year since we met last? That's what it feels like.
It does. It seems like.
We are live on YouTube, so the audience can hear you.
We haven't said anything naughty.
No, I'm just making sure everyone's aware.
Thank you, Pat.
That may have been directed to me for some reason. I may have earned that.
No, just making sure you know.
It is interesting, though, how your perception of time changed during this period. At least mine has, and I've heard other people mention it. I think that's interesting, whether you're more mindful of what you're doing and not having your regular everyday go, or more reflective. I don't know. Maybe that's the secret to finding more time.
Well, this is getting deep, Carrie.
I know. Okay, better stop me right now.
Carrie, I thought I would find more time not driving an hour, 2 hours a day, but really that just quickly filled up with 2 more hours of Zoom calls.
That's the truth.
That is. So one of my favorite terms from this is one of Bert's, and that he talked about getting Zoom butt.
I don't know about you guys. I've been busier than ever. I've just been swamped. I stayed home today so I wouldn't have so many interruptions and could do this.
Rebecca, anytime you're ready, I think we can get started.
Okay, that's what I was thinking as well. So we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. I don't know about you guys, but some of the conversation was, it feels like it's been like a year since we met last. Yesterday, I did some professional development on Zoom. It definitely does not facilitate that kind of conversation that we're used to because of that mute. And I think people withhold sometimes having conversations. And so we definitely want to facilitate. We have some good items on the agenda today. I just wanted to start with a quote. You know, I heard Kathy Ko say, I've just been busy. It's a different busy. I'm in Zoom all the time, or you have so many other distractions. And I would definitely agree. But at the same time, in the middle of this difficulty lies opportunities. I can't help but I'm an optimist. I see so many positive things in our future with traditional schooling from things that are occurring now. Just the collaboration between gen ed and special education. People are in need, and they're in need of more ideas and help. And what that does, it means that they are more open-minded. And so this has allowed me and our staff to provide ideas that things that people might be a little bit more resistant to, but they're also more open because they're in a state of need. And so it's also just the relationships with families, and the list could go on. So in the midst of this crazy pandemic, I look forward to the opportunities that lie ahead of us. And so, Pat, I'm going to go ahead and let you begin roll call.
Okay. Rebecca Helgett.
Here.
Joan Macy.
Here. Had to unmute. Sorry.
No problem. Amy DeMall.
I'm here.
Kathy Kirstenbach Ostermeyer.
He's making progress. There's still a ways to go, but he's making progress.
I'm here. Kathy Ko.
Rachel Marsh. Sarah Schaefer. Carrie Wallace.
I'm here.
Leslie Gerard.
Here.
Heath Piney.
Here.
Stacy Clarkson.
Here.
Tina Gibson.
Here.
Jennifer King.
Here.
Marvin Miller.
Here.
Laura Thompson.
Here.
Becky Werner.
Here.
Jim McNeese. I did speak him. There he is. Mike Martin.
Here.
Heidi Cornell.
Here.
Shelley Kemper.
Here.
Megan Laurent. Troy Pitch. Amy Wagner.
Here.
Deb Young. Rocky Nichols or Mike Burgess.
Mike Burgess is here. Sorry, I'm sitting in for Rocky.
Thank you. Okay. Did I miss anyone? Thank you. We're ready to move ahead.
Okay, I know Pat sent out lots of materials, also sent out the agenda. So at this time, motion to approve the agenda unless there's other items for today.
Heath Piney, I move to approve the agenda.
Marvin Miller, I move to second, or I second that motion.
Okay, Heath made a motion and Marvin seconded that motion. Any discussions prior to a vote? Great. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All right. Any opposing? I assume no. We'll move on. All right, the January minutes, Pat sent those as well. So if you've had time to review those, if not, if you want to take a short glance at the minutes from last meeting, she had January 14th and 15th, so they're a little lengthy. Anyways, once you've reviewed them, I would take a motion to approve those minutes.
Jennifer King, make a motion to approve the minutes.
Stacy Clarkson, I'll second.
Okay, there's been a motion by Jennifer and a second by Stacy to approve the minutes. All those in favor say aye, or no, don't say aye, raise your hand. Opposed, same sign. Awesome. Motion carries. All right, we're going to move right along. I think you guys will find the next section quite interesting. As we were planning, we felt like it would be essential just to kind of go through a timeline of what's taken place over the last 3 to 4 weeks at KSDE and the local districts regarding COVID-19, something none of us were prepared for, but a lot of planning and conversations behind the scenes have been taking place. And so what does that look like in regards to planning for our students? And so, Bert, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you.
Thank you, Rebecca. It does seem like it's been a year since our January meeting. Things really began to get rolling around March 13th when the governor was making the decision to close school for the remainder of this school year. And so over the weekend, Dr. Watson had talked with several of our teacher of the years, and including our current teacher of the year, and asking them if they would come together and develop a plan for the state. So this continuous learning plan was started. I know that several people from my department were involved in the discussions. One of the things that was to be covered was that all students were to be included in the continuous learning plan. Our legislature met quickly and had passed a bill that would allow schools to continue to pay their employees, both classified and licensed staff, through the remainder of the year, contingent upon them coming up with a continuous learning plan. And so there was a rush on after a week of spring break because there was a designated down week for us to get prepared so that we could begin the process of doing some form of education with our students and delivering that by the current staff that were employed. As you can imagine, this was a very hectic time. There were some agency folk that got very alarmed because moving to a virtual environment versus a classroom environment can be very difficult for students with disabilities in particular, but it also can be difficult for ELL, ESOL, migrant, homeless students. How in the world are we ever going to design a process to get school initiated through the remainder of the year? But it happened, and it happened very well compared to what could have happened. So I know that I worked with special educators. I know that the continuous learning plan folk worked with gen ed teachers, special ed teachers, specialist teachers, and they came up with a plan. And so our continuous learning plan has been emulated around the country. There are at least 17 states that have borrowed, let's say, components of the plan and implemented them in their states. I know I was on a NASD, which is the National Association of State Directors of Special Ed call, and I had mentioned that we'd put this plan together and that it was online, and we had a lot of people that were looking at our plan. So one of the things that we looked at in that timeline was how are we going to implement this when we know that we have rural settings, including also some urban settings where there isn't any technology available. So what are we going to do? At that point in time, there was an allowance that as long as no more than 10 people were in a classroom and they were 6 feet apart, that we could have students brought to the school. I don't know of many districts that have selected that option because of the pandemic and because of the virus concern, and they did not want to get students in an environment where they could get contagious and could cause some illness for themselves and for staff. So many of our districts went to an online format or a packet format where packets were prepared. Because the staff were being paid, then that meant that paraprofessionals were freed up to provide support, as well as bus drivers, because we found that bus drivers were not only delivering meals to families, because Cheryl Johnson, God bless her, got very active with the Department of Agriculture and was able to implement a summer food service program where we were able to provide breakfasts and lunches and additional meal services for students. And so we had bus drivers delivering the meals. We also had bus drivers in some districts delivering packets back and forth to the homes. As you can imagine, many parents felt very frustrated because they'd never had to educate their children before in the format of the practice that was required. And the continuous learning plan had different hours per day that were mentioned for a kindergarten, first grade child, for an hour, 2 hours a day, for a second, third grader, fourth, fifth grader, et cetera. And so there was some really good information in that plan that supported education within our state. So since that time, I know that things have died down a lot as we've implemented these plans because every district had to meet 1,116 minimum hours. In our state, you can either have 186 days or you can select 1,116 hours for your school year. And so part of the plan was that 1,116 hours had to be met. And so some districts needed 15 days, some districts needed 30 days. I mean, every district was different. Now, these plans were voted on by the state board last week, where they were approved. And this not only includes the 286 school district, it also includes the 70 private schools that are accredited. So this was a heavy lift. And Michelle Miller, God bless her, she took on that role, volunteered to do it, and she developed that beautifully and worked with KSDE staff to review the plans, including several people from the Division of Special Education and Title Services. They reviewed the plans, went before the state board, and had them approved. So at this point in time, that's where we are. We are implementing continuous learning planning across the state, and we're doing the best that we can to reach and teach every child, including every student within a special population, which includes students with disabilities. So that would be my update for the timeline of where we came from and how we got to where we are today. I know that we put together a facts document which has been key and critical to support the field. And if Laura is available and Dean, I'll start with Laura and then I'll let Dean speak on the fiscal components. But Laura, if you're there, could you please update everyone on the fact document?
Yes, of course I will. Thank you, Bert. Before I go into the FAQ, I want to talk just a little bit about the bullet right before it, which is KSDE roles and responsibilities during this process. And I'll talk about that a little bit more as we get into the FAQ as well. So our roles and responsibilities during this process are to carry out state and federal law as it is written. That any flexibility that might that might occur in the law could only occur if acted on by Congress when it comes to the IDEA, by the Kansas legislature when it comes to Kansas statute, or the Kansas State Board of Education when it comes to state board regulation. And so it's the role of KSDE staff to follow the law and to support school districts in following the law during this time. And that just means that we're helping you think creatively. One of the most common questions I was getting early on is, how do we meet this requirement if we can't do it in person? Well, there's no requirement in special education law that any of these timelines be met in person. And so that's not a question I'm commonly getting anymore now that people are at home, but that's an example of what we do, is we help you think through how to meet this law during this time. I just wanted to make you aware of some specific team members that you can lean on when it comes to certain populations of students. So on your screen, you can see a snapshot of our special education page, and we list there for you some really critical guidance for you to look at during COVID-19. The third one down is continuous learning for our students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. So that is a webinar and resources that were put out by one of our education program consultants, Carrie Rogers. And so if you or if someone you know is struggling with the education of students with the most significant cognitive disabilities, if you're someone who knows about a caregiver who's attempting to support a student at home, please reach out to Carrie Rogers. She is an excellent resource for you in this area. And I'm putting her email address in the chat box. So another important team member during this time is our education program consultant that works in the area of gifted. Her name is Melissa Valenza. Melissa and I are currently working on guidance and resources to put out around supporting students who are gifted during this time of continuous learning. And so I encourage you, if you have any questions about serving that particular population, to connect with Melissa. She's an excellent resource. So I've put her name there in the chat box as well. I like that shout out to Carrie. Carrie is great, along with all of our staff. This is a very strange time to do this, but I would like to introduce you to a new staff member that you all have not had the opportunity to meet yet. Her name is Julie Rand. Julie is our new 619 coordinator. And you're probably thinking, what is that, some sort of like area code? What is 619? Well, 619 refers to the section of IDEA that provides requirements on children ages 3 through 5. And so Natalie McLean was formerly in that position, and she is still with KSDE. She has just shifted to another early childhood position, and we feel extremely fortunate to have Julie. Julie, I believe, is here on Zoom today. Julie, if you're here, would you be willing to unmute and say hi so that you appear on people's screens?
Yes, here I am. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you, Julie. Okay, good. I told her that she at least had to say hi so that her video would appear. So Julie has been fielding lots of questions on C to B transition, which people, of course, are having to think very differently about right now. She's also receiving lots of questions on how to complete assessments for early childhood outcomes as we get to the end of the school year. So if you have any questions on that, or if you have constituents that have questions on that, please feel free to refer them to Julie. I've put her email address in the chat box. Julie is also very connected you just where the continuous learning guidance is that Bert referenced earlier. So if you come to our main page, ksde.org, you see this scrolling banner. across the top of the screen. And one of the things that you can scroll to is Kansas Continuous Learning. And that's where you can find the guidance that Bert referenced earlier. Where I'm going to take you now, though, is to the special education page, which is the screenshot on your PowerPoint is what you were seeing earlier with that special education page. For me, the easiest way to get there is to hover over programs and services. And then I click on special education. Okay, and so I've got this pulled up on another tab. Did that come up? Okay, I'm seeing some nodding. Very good. So the FAQ is the very first document here, and I'm not going to go through every part of the FAQ. I'm going to assume you see the FAQ unless you tell me otherwise. Okay, you're seeing it. All right, but what I want to go over with you is this is kind of linking back to where I started out, which is that unless Congress and then following Congress, the Kansas legislature would have to allow certain flexibility. I just want you to know that this frequently asked questions document is adhering to all state and federal law, because that's that is what we have to do during this time. We're very clear here at the beginning that we do not have the authority. The Kansas State Department of Education does not have the authority to alter or waive any kind of statutory requirements or timelines. And so the other thing I wanted to point out here is that when we release a new version, when this first started, we were releasing one, it seemed like every other day. It's been several days since we released a new version. But when we do put out a new version, there are asterisks to show you what material has been new or revised since we released a previous document. And what I do when I come into this is I do a search, a Control-F search. I'm on a PC. For an asterisk, and then I can just easily get to what has been changed since the last update. So this document is organized into 3 sections. So it starts out with special education legal questions, and this is the bulk of the document. These questions are coming to us from special education directors, other special education staff, and from families. And when we receive the same question multiple times, then it generally finds a place in this document. The people who work on this section of the document are myself, Tiffany Hester, Mark Ward, and Brian Dempsey. And so if you have any special education legal questions and you don't find them captured in this document, you can reach out to any of those people that I just named. And I will put their names and email addresses in the chat box here in just a second. So please reach out to them. Reach out to all of us if you need anything when it comes to special education legal questions. The second section of this document is on special education data reporting questions. And so most of these questions have to do with our SPED Pro web application, which is where we collect the lion's share of our special education data. Your primary resource for that on our team is Mason Vosberg, and he supports special education directors and data clerks in reporting data to KSDE. And so he also creates his own FAQ that is particular to data clerks, and back on that special education page at the very bottom, you'll find a frequently asked questions that really get more into the weeds of data. These data reporting questions are more high level, and they include other data collections as well, such as early childhood outcomes that I referenced earlier, other SPP, APR data collections, other state data collections. And then the third and last section of this document is, oh goodness, there's way too many C's here, is section C, which is on fiscal questions. And so this section is primarily overseen by Dean Zeitz, who I'm going to turn it over to here in a minute. So if you have any kind of special education fiscal questions, Dean is a great first contact, and he has lots of support from Christy Weiler, from Evelyn Alden, and from others that he may pull in on certain questions. And so to talk about special education fiscal questions, I will turn it over to Dean.
Thanks, Laura. And really, the one piece that I want to highlight, and I think you stopped sharing your screen, so I'll pop mine up here just a moment. just a second here. Let's see if this works. And okay. Does everyone see the fiscal question? And so to that end, we have been advising districts that as they are making decisions here in these final couple of months of this current fiscal year, operate under the assumption that there won't be any waivers to maintenance of effort. Because we have heard from some districts that do have some concerns, because even if they keep all their staff employed and are serving kiddos in this current environment, that just the nature of not transporting students like they were before, not providing some of the in-person stuff that they were providing before, they may be coming in below their maintenance of effort threshold. And unfortunately, there is nothing in IDA that allows for an exception for that. So we're really trying to, as those come up, trying to work with individual districts or individual cooperatives or interlocals to identify maybe other kind of one-time costs that they could incur for special education. Maybe now is a good time to buy, a piece of equipment or something that you've been thinking about, but have been kind of kicking down the road, so that you do continue to meet maintenance of effort. Because if a district doesn't meet maintenance of effort, unfortunately, we don't have any flexibility here at the state, and the feds and the U.S. Department of Education doesn't have flexibility, barring intervention by Congress, to not take future funds away. And right now, it's certainly not a slam dunk that there will be any waivers for that. The other thing that I wanted to hit on was with respect to staff, and again, Laura touched on this a little bit, and Bert touched on this a little bit, particularly regarding paras and other hourly staff. There have been provisions both at the federal level within the department, the U.S. Department of Education's authority, and then the additional flexibility given by our state legislature that allows hourly staff to continue to be paid for the duration of this school year, up to as they would have been paid prior to the emergency. And within that, it's not just that districts can continue to pay those staff, but in this FAQ, we do address the issue in which, what if you have let's say a para who is unable to provide the specific service that they were providing before, and that there is not currently another special education need, even after we've kind of reevaluated the way services are being delivered. Could they be used in an alternate way for this very specific period of time, so they're still providing a service? So for instance, a very specific example, if you have a district that has kiddos who are having their needs met for FAPE through the continuous learning, but we still have some paras that aren't being fully utilized. They could be utilized for things like helping to ride on buses and take packets out to kiddos, to all kiddos, or to deliver other supplies to kids and families, to be used in other meaningful, useful ways, rather than having to be on leave and be paid, but being prohibited from helping out. Obviously, there's implications for the local contracts and other things to be decided and all that. But that's kind of the big gist of it. And I think we'll probably talk about CARES and such a little bit later. So that's kind of it for the FAQ portion of fiscal. Any questions? All right, I'll kick it back to Bert.
Okay, so we covered our timelines. If you have any specific questions about what we're doing or what we're attempting to do in the state to serve students, put them in the chat, or you can contact any of us and we'll get back with you. And in a timely manner, we all try to get back with people within a 24-hour period, and we've been pretty successful at that. But we want you to be aware that special education does continue in the state of Kansas, and that we are trying to do the best that we can. Now, one of the things you're going to hear about, and whether we say it now or whether you hear it from the district, is if there were any students who we were not able to deliver the depth and breadth of services that they need, then we'll make adjustments in the future as far as what we may have to do to provide them additional educational supports. That still needs to be clarified yet, and we're looking for federal guidance. We were to receive some briefs, is what they're calling them, from the federal government, which we hoped would provide some explanations, and we're still waiting to receive those. They're at least a week overdue, and I understand they're going through their legal process of approval. So as soon as we get those, we'll be sending those out to the field as well to let them know of any flexibilities or any information coming from our federal government that provides information relative to how we provide special education services now or at a later date. So that's what I had on that. As far as federal briefs, which you'll see on your agenda, they're pending. We're still waiting on those. I guess we're going to wait a while. I know that some directors thought that we would receive waivers from the federal government. And one of the things that I've shared with them on the communities of practice, which we'll talk about in a minute, which occurs every Friday, is that we also have parents that are advocating on the other side, wanting more services, wanting more direct services, and wanting to ensure that their children don't fall behind. So we've got a scale here that's measuring the district's ability to provide supports and services using this remote model or this virtual model. And then we have the parents on the other side that are wanting to make sure that their child gets the educational services that they need to be successful in the school environment. So that's why I think we're seeing a little hesitancy on the part of the Office of Special Education Programs to provide any waiver, if you will, of regulation or of requirements, is because we do have that balancing act. And that's why I'm saying to you that I'm looking for those future services then that we'll be providing where we weren't able to provide them during this opportunity, but we will at a later date. And again, we will be letting the field know more about that as we gain that information from the Office of Special Education Programs. The community of practice for directors was established when Laura Jurgensen contacted Jana Rossborough and Alina Lincoln, who were prior assistant directors for the special education department at KSDE and are currently working in technical assistance positions, and asked them if they would be willing to develop a community of practice so that directors of special education could have an opportunity to discuss and talk about topics of concern or issues that they wanted for KSDE to be aware of. And so what happened is this community of practice is set up every Friday at 9 o'clock. It's just for the directors. I've been invited to come on as they begin and give them any updates that I might have and words of encouragement to let them know how supportive I am of what they're doing. And then I get off of this webinar, and it gives those directors an opportunity to really talk to one another without having any I spy, if you will, from the State Department. And then we get an update from Alina and Jana afterward of anything. It's not anything that is specific to one director or another, but topics of concern are then shared with the State Department so that we can choose to do something on our part if we need to improve the facts document, if we need to provide technical assistance in another manner, if we need to get some supports out to districts, then that's how we're doing that. And Laura, I don't know if you want to say anything else about community of practice, but I'll give you the floor if you'd like to speak now.
Thanks, Bert. No, I don't have anything else I want to add. I know that there are several directors on SEAC, though, so if there's any director who would like to speak to the community of practice, please feel free to unmute yourself and do so.
I think those meetings were extremely helpful and a brilliant idea. One of the discussions, one of the first topics that they brought up, I think in the first one, was the difference between technical problems and adaptive problems, and then technical solutions and adaptive solutions. And they helped directors to understand that the problem we're in now, there's not a technical solution. There's not a rule saying, if this happens, here's what you do. So we have to think outside the box. And that's something that I think is very important because it's hard for us to do and not something we're used to doing. So this provided a forum for us to have those discussions about the adaptive solutions and collaborate around how we could proceed moving forward. And I think they were extremely helpful.
This is Kathy Ko. You know, of course, agree with everything Heath said, but I also thought it was perfect because they're outside of the department, so they could really talk to us and we could brainstorm with them, and it kind of let KSDE still focus on what your charge is, but then they could give us ideas that were outside of that a little bit and some guidance in that direction. So it really helped a lot, because I know there were things they could say that you guys can't say because of the positions you're in. So thank you, appreciated it.
I second everything that you two said, but I really appreciate the thorough thoughtfulness of KSDE of including their stakeholders such as that. You know, when this first started, directors were scrambling, and you know, at that moment, they're needing that support from KSDE. And now that I look back, I am very thankful that KSDE was not reactive in their information, that they were very thorough and thoughtful about how they were going to provide information to directors. And anyways, thank you. You guys shared a ton of information. And there's so many things that probably were not shared, but from the perspective of a director, I appreciate.
Well, thank you to all of you. We did this so that you'd have that opportunity to have that conversation and give them some way ability to do that, because the federal government had not given us any opportunity to waive any federal regulation, and we did not have any state guidance that we could waive state regulations. So it became very concerning to us that districts were frustrated in how to go about implementing a totally different design within this pandemic from what they were familiar with and what they were providing. And anyone who's worked with virtual programs like I had in my superintendent role in a previous life, you're not aware of those problems that can occur in connectivity, in making sure that students do work, that they stay up to date, that they do have adult supervision. Lots of concerns there. So I'm glad that Laura was able to work with Jana and Alina, and I'm going to give her 100% credit for this because that's where it belongs. And so that really helped us out, having those partners with technical assistance that we have so many here in the state of Kansas that work with us. We are so fortunate that we have such great technical assistance providers. Really appreciate all of them. And they are ready, willing, and able to do anything that we ask of them at any time. So I want to thank them as well. As far as shifting of TASN resources, I'm going to let Carrie speak to that, if Carrie would like to. Perhaps Carrie is not available at the time. The shifting of TASN resources.
Am I here now?
Yes, you're here now.
Okay, that was odd. I was always here, but okay. So for TASN, they have been very busy, and I'm going to highlight a few aspects of their work that are most relevant for this. They have been, of course, taking as much as the face-to-face over to virtual platforms as they can. And one example of that is through
Next slide, Amy.
the paraeducator training and modules that they've had up and made quickly available. And they've had over 1,000 people are participating, going through those modules. Also, an interesting aspect of the work, as they found out, is that because our method of follow-up and coaching, we already have existing relationships established across the state in many of those places. And so the follow-up and virtual coaching part has really been unimpacted by this. They've still maintained those connections and provided that support. Namely, one that really stood out to me was our e-mentoring for student success. And so we have 100 early career special educators that have received one-on-one mentoring, and that has continued through this. And so they have a person that's there helping them think differently during this time. And they've been really heartened by the courage and the dedication that people have had in working towards that and through this whole process. The another examples are MTSS team put together a couple of core documents. One that focused around kind of some critical parts to the our standards. And then they have another document that focuses on social emotional learning. And it's almost like a decision flow tree document, a one-page document that's has live links to it that provide and assist the support for that instruction around there. Our Kansas Parent Information Resource Center has been very involved with developing and disseminating the continuous learning package that KSDE that Bert referred to earlier. And they have provided the primary content for the family engagement components of that. Also, our school mental health initiative team has continued work within their teams and districts. And they also are able now to, they've been able to fast forward their work around some of their training modules. So you will see the modules coming out very soon around trauma-informed learning and practices, as well as the family focused on caregiver training. And I know Leslie has been a part of that work, those modules. So those will be coming out very soon. Then the other thing that they have done is they put what you see on your screen is is kind of a, I'll call it kind of a curated set of resources that all the different providers went through and looked at and said, so what is the most important thing we think people need to have at their fingertips during this time in the pandemic response. And so it ties in with our resources on our page. It's meant not to be duplicative. They've also coordinated these resources with the ones that our Kansas Association of Special Education Administrators are putting out. And so throughout these, so under each of these bullets on your screen is a set of links that take you to specific either documents or webinars, and of course threaded throughout this is a lot of our work from Kansas Infinitec and the resources that are specific to providing support around instructional technology, assistive technology, supporting assistive technology via online delivery types of things. And of course, all those people still also remain available for everyone. Crystal, I asked Crystal about the Big Blue Button request, and she said they actually have not, they actually have gone down in number since this started. But everyone is still very much engaged and out there supporting teams and districts and students across the state.
Thank you, Carrie. Really appreciate that. I know that our TASN programs have really stepped up to assist school districts that they were serving at the time, and we really appreciate all that they do for the state of Kansas. We're one of the most fortunate states because when people hear about our technical assistance system network, they're jealous and wish they had one. Well, it's going to be up to them to create it. I mean, Kansas developed it over the need in the state, and these programs have all been funded in order to assist our districts. So that's what we're doing. And I guess right now we're going to have a KC case report from Heath.
Hold on, just getting my mic done. Sorry, a little technical slowness. So when all these closures happened, it was very difficult for special educators because we were asked to completely change our work in about 10 days. And it was a big struggle because IDEA wasn't written with the pandemic in mind, and much of what we were asked to do under law didn't fit within the model created by building closures due to a public health crisis. So I feel like KC and the members and directors across the state, in conjunction with many people, including those that have talked about already with KSDE and TASN, pulled together as a community of special education leaders. I know within my region, Region 6, Lena Kisner and Doug Anderson organized weekly meetings, which we're still holding, which were very helpful. I know other regions have met as well. I created and shared a Google folder to keep members updated and to have one location to find the many guidance documents sent out by KSDE and various federal agencies. This folder included over 20 guidance documents, over 15 different webinars that are still, there's more than that, but some of those are still there with recordings or other resources. Instructional resources, there was over 30 links, and there were many templates for contingency learning plans and other documents once we got those created. Also, we've had many members, as we've mentioned before, participating in those community of practice webinars, and I think that discussion gave us a great opportunity to collaborate around how to move forward. KC is a state unit of the Council of Administrators of Special Education, or CASE, which is an international association. This Friday, CASE will hold their 6th webinar since the pandemic began. They have been working to help special educators across the nation to understand how to provide services that are reasonable, accessible, and appropriate in light of the circumstances that we're in during this community health crisis, which I think was a big, helpful piece to organize together as a state and to organize across the nation to try to figure out how to tackle the problem of what we needed to do next and to make things reasonable, accessible, and appropriate in light of the circumstances that we're in. Because IDEA wasn't written with a pandemic in mind, and CASE, along with NASD to that point, have sent a letter to OSERS and Congress seeking temporary targeted flexibilities for IDEA during the crisis. And they put an emphasis that they support IDEA and are not seeking waivers, but they're seeking temporary targeted flexibilities to help navigate some of the complexities that are given to us with being asked in IDEA to do things that are just not possible during a pandemic crisis and stay-at-home orders. So I think it's been very helpful to have many organizations work together to try to support directors so we can support teachers, so we can support families and students. And I've been very proud about the collaboration that I've seen across the state with KC, with KSDE, and our connections with CASE as well. That's all I've got.
Rebecca, would you like for us to continue with what are the unmet needs within the state and who can address them?
That would be great.
I think we'll open this up to our SEAC membership, if that's right with you, Rebecca, and see what they're seeing as unmet needs in the state.
Yeah, I think this is a good time for any other members who want to be a part of this conversation, contribute anything that you need clarified or have questions about.
I don't know if this is this is Stacy Clarkson, and I'm not sure if this is an unmet need or just a topic that's starting to come up as we talk to different leaders and in different conversations. Recently, USA has been having some superintendent meetings once a week, and I've been a part of those, and then some debriefing on those. And I guess now the main topic that I'm hearing is, what do we do next year when we start school? And of course, no one knows what we do next year. There's probably 3 scenarios. that I can come up with off the top of my head. So I guess that to me is, it's kind of good that people are thinking ahead now that they've kind of calmed down and have this. But I think that thinking ahead also is producing some anxiety about what will this look like in the future.
And Stacy, this is Carrie. So that is what you just described is what the TASN providers is like next on their brainstorming list to help provide support around. So that's excellent. And then, so we need to make those connections.
That's also going to be one of the topics addressed in the CASE webinar on Friday, is a discussion over what to do next.
Okay, I'll make sure that the folks that I'm keeping regular contact with will have that information. Thank you.
And I'll make sure that Crystal and Kevin get the CASE information out to the TASN folks, providers too, Heath.
And this is Kathy Ko, and on top of everything else, we still have big time teacher shortages. So I don't know what we're going to do about that. I just got another resignation for a teacher in our area going to general ed. We lose more of our teachers to general ed out here, and I don't know what to do about it. I don't have anybody. I don't have anybody who's got the certificates for special ed. They're all on waivers. They're all doing TAPS or LAPS, and I am really frustrated right now.
Another item that I've been hearing a lot, and in every meeting I was in last week, from our region to the community of practice to my CASE meeting I had Sunday night, is the discussion about ESY. I know there's a lot of stress about ESY. And the difficulty is we don't know if our state's going to be open, if our state's not going to be open, if the state is open and we're in one of those 3 levels of restriction that the White House has outlined. What does that mean for our students? Many of those students are medically fragile. Many of those students have other health issues. It's just a big difficulty trying to plan. I know many people that I've talked to said they're just planning for virtual. I think it would be helpful if there was any type of guidance we could receive on summer school from outside just our local area, some more guidance on how to plan the different options that might be available.
I'll jump in here since there's a quiet time. I think one of the things I'm hearing is professional development for staff on how to utilize technology to effectively deliver instruction to students with disabilities. That seems to be a real need right now. And another need then that counters that is professional development for parents, training with parents on how to utilize the technology that their students are expected to use. Because I've seen a couple of parents that have sent in concerns stating that they don't know how to use the technology to support their students. So I think PD is a need. And the other area that's come up quite often from directors is the Medicaid issue, that we're not able to deliver the services in a manner that they're eligible for Medicaid reimbursement. And that is a huge part of budgets for special education folk, and so they're not going to be getting that Medicaid, and they're concerned about how they're going to fill that gap.
I agree with everything. I think one thing that makes it challenging is it feels very reactive. It is reactive. I mean, we are learning as we go, as we were not aware that this pandemic was necessarily going to take place. And so kind of like what Kathy said, the overwhelmingness of just trying to plan PD now, support the teachers with virtual learning, and then think of the unfilled positions that we have. You know, we're continuing business as if we're starting school. But then there's also that, like what Stacy said, what's school even going to start? What's school going to look like at the beginning of the year? And so in some aspects, sometimes it feels like we're putting the cart before the horse because there's so many unknowns. But at the same time, we have to be proactive and be ready to make sure that we are prepared as if students are going to be in session. Like Heath said, with special education directors, ESY has been a huge conversation, also a little bit of confusion. But, you know, in regards to these individual continuous learning plans, I think that it's very doable to do that virtual learning through ESY. It's not going to look like what it has necessarily in the past, but it also is an opportunity. It's better than not serving them at all. And so in regards to the PD right now, Bert, you know, we have these with Zoom, we had created several opportunities as well. The one thing that makes it so challenging is just that facilitation of conversation going back and forth. So it's like no one has really mastered good quality PD yet. So it's so challenging for some of the staff because anything past an hour, you just lose them. And so my staff are trying to really try to figure out, you know, instructional coaches, consultants. Now that they have that time, they have an awesome opportunity to plan good quality professional development. But at the same time, it's very difficult when you know, don't have access to the things that you're used to having access to.
That's a good point, Rebecca. The other thing I've heard is that we have Chrome, we have PC, and we have Mac. And so sometimes what teachers are utilizing or sending out isn't compatible with what parents have in the home if the district has not provided the device. So it's also that translation from one device to another. We've got some challenges. We certainly have, but it was all things that just crept up on us. We weren't ready for it. We weren't planning for this.
No, I will jump in if it's a good time just to kind of give you guys an update about some of what we are hearing from families. And that one was one of them, Bert, that you just mentioned, some of that. You know, we had a parent call that uses a MacBook and having a lot of trouble accessing questions related to timelines and evaluations, some around functional behavior assessments and how is that possible. Some questions about IEP meetings and that, you know, some being canceled and not really knowing what the plan is for rescheduling those. Let me look. I'm looking. We created a document for staff. Let's see. Some things related to ESY, questions about 504 plans and timelines related to 504 plans, questions about students with visual or, you know, hearing challenges and how it's been a little problematic as far as access to Zoom classrooms for some of those students. Multiple students in one house, but, you know, families only having access to one computer, so trying to just kind of keep up with all of that. You know, some of it is just like everybody has said, no one was prepared for it, so really not sure how to best handle it, but I think, you know, people are trying.
So I helped facilitate a session at a parent camp that KSD put on. So some feedback that I got from my group there was that they're having trouble either getting their kids engaged or keeping them engaged in this style of learning, and that's really becoming more of a problem than it was at the beginning. Like at first, maybe they were kind of excited and gung-ho, but now that's wearing off. And I think being reflective on my own district, I think that's because that's how we started. We as educators started off really gung-ho, and we've kind of stopped getting those really engaging things going on, like having different special days and things like that. Then they also, so thinking of professional development, something about the you know, engaging students in online learning, keeping them on their device. So one thing parents mentioned was that their students are used to doing other things with the device, you know, play type things with the device, and so they're having trouble teaching them that this is for work and how to keep them on that. And then some ideas for along those lines for reinforcing students, things that we have built into our classrooms, and some students even more in their plans, but every classroom has reinforcement built in. And then we've got and sensory needs. I heard a lot about how to meet students' sensory needs in this time. So those are some feedback that's some feedback I got from those families.
You know, I saw a comment that Kathy Ko made. Some of our neediest families are just disconnected. You know, in some conversations that I was having with staffing, some of our neediest families, you know, we realized one of our families had 4 students with disabilities. And when we added up all the gen ed and the related staff, this parent was dealing with 14 different individuals and trying to identify which one was working with which student at which time. And we rapidly, you know, we put this thing in place as quick as we could to provide that service. But because of the time frame, we didn't have enough time to really talk about the pros and the cons and problem solve all the things that we may come across through the implementation. And quickly what we realized, some of our parents that are disconnected and kids are not getting on is because the parents are so overwhelmed by 14 individuals. We realized that those are appropriate services during a typical school year, but at this time, this child is more apt to get appropriate services if we limit the number of related services and individuals that are involved. And so we quickly had to, what it's also allowed staff to do, when I say those possibilities, we have most of our related staff going in and co-teaching with all teachers. So they're in the same session at the same time, which is so exciting to see co-teaching at that level when we know that's what they're educated to do. But due to time frames and scheduling, it doesn't happen oftentimes during the school year. So I'm excited from their excitement of what they're experiencing co-teaching together in that realm.
Rebecca, this is Stacy. I might jump on to something that comes to mind when I think of this. What you're talking about just now is really, we should really be considering modeling what's being done in the infant toddler world for the last several years. That idea of having a primary provider working with a family in the home, and then we as professionals coach that primary provider up. And it doesn't necessarily matter who the primary provider is. It could be the speech person, or it could be the OT, or it could be the classroom teacher. But having that one point of contact really does alleviate a lot of stress for families with multiple kids getting services. There's a lot of research behind the idea of the primary provider model and the relationship building that does. So I hope that as we move forward, and if we do move forward in this kind of more virtual environment in the future, that we start seeing special ed co-ops or districts looking at that model and emulating that.
To touch on something in the chat and what Rebecca and Stacy both talked about. You know, I think right now we're going to have, for many of our students in disadvantaged populations, including those that we serve, there's going to be limited effectiveness to what we can teach online, no matter how hard we work. And we don't want to overwhelm trying to make that happen, to make great strides online. It would be good to help reinforce the things they already know, understand exactly where they're at now, so we can pick that up when we're back in session. But one concern I have is I do hear some discussion of, oh, now we know how to teach online. We should do a lot more of this later. And I think we need to be very mindful of how that affects disadvantaged populations, how students learning online at homes, where I saw somebody tweet the other night about how they realize that they've got, students that have 10 siblings they take care of, they eat a can of corn for breakfast. They don't have that support at home to help them, guide them through that. So not overwhelming people now, trying to make giant leaps forward, but planning for what we're going to do when we come back. And when we think about coming back, don't let the conversation that, well, now we need to do all kinds of online instruction, and that excitement from the technology folks totally wash over what needs to be done for kids in special education. We have to advocate for their needs as well, and advocate for how many of those students are going to struggle online. And we need to try to figure out a way to make it work for all of them.
Sorry, I don't know what I was doing. I lost the page. Any other questions? Bert, is there anything that we missed that we discussed earlier? I think we
Not
had a
on the unmet needs. I think we've covered that pretty well.
We just had so much on that list. I was trying to mark them off as we went. I want to make sure if there was anything that we did not discuss that we got that covered.
Okay, for the record, did I say we have a teacher shortage? Okay, just teasing.
You just want to make sure that gets in the record.
I'm so frustrated right now. I just can't stand it.
You and about 100 other agencies in the state that are really having difficulty recruiting and retaining teachers. And it's not just special educators, it's general educators too. We have a shortage of related service providers. We have a shortage of core special education teachers. We have a shortage of general ed elementary teachers, preschool teachers. I mean, it's pervasive, and it is concerning because we don't see a huge pool standing in line to enroll in programs. And that's something we don't address, but I've heard some comments about what the Kansas Board of Regents is planning, because they're very concerned about how they're going to get started up again. And we're dependent on them to train our folk. So I know that most of the programs have gone to online training, which is a good thing in a sense, because those teachers then are familiar with that format. But at the same time, I find that it leaves a lot of teachers not having that socialization and that ability to be in conversation at regular classes with one another, which oftentimes promotes good learning. So KKO, I feel for you. I know we had 8 positions open last spring when I left, and somehow or other Tanya found folk for all of them, but we went to 4 paras that came back then to teach and were enrolled in programs. And that is even more frustrating, because then you've got a teacher who's never been in a classroom, if you will, as a licensed teacher, and they're also enrolled in classes. And so we give them some of the most difficult students and programs that we have to deliver, and then they're enrolled in classes as well. And it becomes very frustrating for that person, and might be a reason why we see the turnover that we do.
At SKACD, we are actually having to add an instructional coach next year to help with SPED programs. We only have one that helps our new teachers when we hire them, and we have so many long-term subs that need support. And if they stay with us the second year, many of them still need support, but we're not able to provide it through the same means. So adding that other position, we're hoping that will at least help us with all of our long-term subs.
You know, I think just through some of the planning of COVID and the collaboration and some of the PD that we've done in the past with related services, I'm really starting to see some of that rethink come together. I mean, it's really what IDEA was intended to do, but I received an email the other day from an accountant from the state, because our numbers were down because we did some professional development with related service. It's really helped with our numbers. So when you think about that shortage, if we also are addressing what special education was intended to do with looking at continuous services and the LRE process and quality versus quantity, it will impact what those numbers look like. And I guess I'm excited because oftentimes you can provide that professional development, and that concept is very difficult for sometimes related staff to understand. And our numbers reflected that this year. And, you know, it's exciting when you're able to see some professional development actually make an impact, but also that that did help us out in regards to shuffling around some of our numbers where we didn't have to replace a position, and student needs are being met more effectively because there's more collaboration and support to personnel than a one size fits all model, and they're, you know, teaching in segregation. So I think this is causing us to really think creatively in regards to how we provide services. But it doesn't mean that needs aren't being met. It could be that by us being more creative to meet the needs of students, maybe we've overserved in some aspects where that did cause us some of our own headache with shortages. New topic, new agenda item someday.
Exactly.
As we were talking, one thing did jump to my mind is that both the Kansas School for the Deaf and the Kansas School for the Blind have started offering different types of outreach resources and supports as well. So I don't know if Joan is on here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, would you want to talk about that a little bit? I know I've tried to make sure that was sent out in emails, but since this group here is a good information base to make sure.
Absolutely, yeah. So there's two things. We did have a workshop scheduled to go over the NASD guidelines for deaf and hard of hearing kiddos. And we had over 100 people registered for that conference. In fact, it got so large that we had to cap it because the format we wanted is not that you just sit and get. We wanted you to actually kind of read the guidelines and then how does that apply to your situation. And so we've had to, due to COVID, of course, we've had to cancel that. So we're looking at some dates next fall. So we're anxious to bring that in to kind of help provide some of that knowledge base and awareness so we can improve the current systems. But then currently during the CLP time, during our school building closures, we are opening KSD. We're providing some resources through our new website, which will be launched here in a couple of days. And we're also opening our CLP program to students from throughout the state, whether they attend KSD or not. We've had a lot of districts reach out to us because of the teacher shortage and because of the resources that are lacking specifically for deaf and hard of hearing. We've had a lot of districts reach out to us and say, we're just really not sure what to do with these kids, especially with some of the significant language delays and the lack of access. Putting the headsets on doesn't work for a lot of our kids, especially even if they're wearing implants or hearing aids. You can't access it auditorily. And so what do we do? So we've been collaborating with several districts and allowing their students to tag into our classrooms and to our teachers and our resources so that kids can still get some specially designed instruction by people that have been trained in that field. So if you guys know of anyone out there that is interested in tapping into those, or if anybody needs some support, we are happy to visit with you on Zoom or attend IEPs to talk with teams, to support parents and giving some parents some resources on what they can do at the home. Please feel free to reach out to us because we're here as a resource for everyone in the state. So however we can help, we're happy to do it.
All right, any more items for discussion as we're on the COVID topic? If not, we'll go ahead and move on to SEAC membership 2021.
Rebecca, sorry, you didn't discuss the waiver bullet.
Where am I at? Who is that? Oh, Laura.
That's the last bullet. And I can set that up if you want.
Yes, we had that after unmet needs, IDEA waiver, ESEA waivers. Can we go ahead and discuss that, Rebecca?
Yes.
Laura, would you like to speak to that?
I'd be happy to set up that discussion. So in the context of IDEA, on March 27, Congress passed and the president signed the CARES Act, which I know you all have heard a lot about. There is a specific provision in the CARES Act, and it requires the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, to write a report to Congress with information regarding flexibility that might be necessary during the pandemic. And so what that provision indicates is that not later than 30 days after the date of enactment of the CARES Act, which was March 27, that Secretary DeVos has to prepare and submit a report to different congressional committees, the ones on appropriations and the ones on education, with recommendations on any additional waivers that are needed under the IDEA, the ESEA, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and the Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Act. And this report has to contain information on the waivers that the Secretary believes are necessary to be enacted into law to give states limited flexibility and to give local education agencies the ability to meet the needs of students during this pandemic. And so we thought it was important to put this on your agenda this morning so that as a state advisory panel, you could discuss whether you as an entity wanted to submit comments to address the needs here in Kansas. And so Heath might speak a little bit about the letter that is being sent from CASE as a starting point, but I know that this is a very diverse council, and so you all likely represent different groups of constituents that may be in different places on this topic. And so, of course, there's no requirement that this council submit a letter to Secretary DeVos to help guide her thinking when it comes to writing this report. But because you had this meeting prior to this deadline, we wanted to raise this for your consideration. Before Rebecca opens it up to discussion, I also just want to remind you, as I did at the beginning, that we're not just thinking about federal special education law here. So if Congress waives portions of IDEA, the Kansas legislature still has statutes on special education. The state board has regulations on special education that would not go away with a waiver from Congress. And so if SEAC is going to consider comments on waivers, it might also consider any report or letter it might make to the legislature or to the state board regarding state waivers as well. And then, of course, like I mentioned, this is a very diverse group. So just wanting to hear from all of you and the different constituencies you represent with your thoughts on this. So Rebecca, does that give you what you need to set up that discussion?
Thank you. I can't believe I forgot this one. Heath, I'm going to go ahead and let you share, start off with the discussion with that letter.
Okay, I just added the letter to the chat if you want to see the actual letter. This letter was sent to the Office of Special Education Programs and the Office of Special Education Rehabilitative Services on March 31st. It was sent to Congress last Tuesday. And if you look at it, one thing to point out, as I mentioned before, what they're looking for are temporary targeted flexibilities, not a waiver. Everybody in CASE, and I assume NASD, are staunch supporters of IDEA and students' rights, and we do not want to lessen the rights or change IDEA. They're just looking for some flexibilities in certain areas during the closure. If you have the document open, I'm not going to read it all to you, but if you don't have it open, I'll just give you some ideas. There are some timeline flexibilities that are requested. One of those happens reevaluations. Many of them are going to be difficult, if not impossible, to do from a distance. You're not able to do in-person testing. We don't want to do a reevaluation on your education at home. We want to understand what it looks like. Few timelines. I've heard a lot of feedback from my own district and other districts that parents don't even want to do IEPs right now. They feel like parents are struggling with the time and their students all being home and trying to work through that. Some of them would prefer to wait for their IEPs until we're back in school. There are also some requests for complaint timelines and transition timelines on that document. The next big category is procedural flexibilities. If you look down there, there are some procedures inside of IEPs that they would like some flexibility to happen. As far as some of that would be a little different in Kansas because of Kansas law, but decisions about placement, such as that. There are flexibilities for data collection. When you look at our CCEIS data, the SSIP, the State Systemic Improvement Plan, State Performance Plan, Annual Performance Report, there are requests for flexibilities in those areas because we are not currently in buildings. These requested for fiscal management, such as maintenance of effort and comprehensive coordinated early intervening services. Those are the main areas. that they were seeking flexibility in. And again, they're looking for flexibilities that are targeted and temporary. But that, hopefully you've seen that letter. If you have any questions about that letter or what they're seeking, let me know.
Thanks, Heath. I think you gave a thorough idea regarding that flexibility and what you're specifically targeting. You know, I like to open this up to discussion because I think when we think about the flexibility, we're being flexible for all students. This closure is impacting all students, not just students with disabilities. We do know that it is impacting their services at this time, but I also know many of us have children in school and it's impacting them as well. And so I do think we need to open this up to discussion to see if SEAC would be interested in submitting a letter regarding some of these future items due to the lack of flexibility that could cause a significant amount of formal complaints, due process, and a huge burden on special education in the future if we're held to a different standard than general education at the beginning of the year. And so I'm just going to mute myself and open it up for discussion.
So Rebecca, are you suggesting that we write a letter in support, or I guess what you're suggesting is maybe as a state organization or a state advisory committee, we write something for supporting that would be separate from NASD and all the other entities that are writing that?
Yes, I think it would come from SEAC. It doesn't have to be specific like CASE. I think it could, you know, we have a variety of different organizations and needs. Kathy?
Yeah, this is Kathy Ko, and I very much think we should write a letter. I think that I agree. We don't want to take away any rights and we don't want it for the long term, but I think we need to show that we believe there needs to be some flexibility here. And I'd use the case letter as a kind of those are the key points to me that I think are important as well.
This is Heath. I'll jump in again. I think a letter would be beneficial, and I think it would be part of our duty as an advisory council, if we felt that there needed to be some flexibilities, to provide a letter that stated those flexibilities. As a special education director, I believe the ones sent by CASE and NASD are very much needed as a request. As you've mentioned, Rebecca, there are other organizations that there might be some other areas that they either feel differently about or would like to request also, because that was just from a special education technical issue director level document where there might be some other opportunities that people see.
Kathy Ko again, and is Mike Burgess still on? I was just wondering from the disability rights group if they're hearing anything.
Yeah, I'm here. And I haven't had a chance to process the letter yet. I know when there was discussion about waivers, kind of nationally, that gave us a significant amount of pause. So I would definitely want to run traps before, I would feel comfortable signing on or being a part of a sign on something. I mean, I understand the needs and the time that we have, but I know, we're dealing with a lot of, just trying to like you guys trying to figure all this out and help our clients to figure out all this out as well. And, of course, there's an intersection, as was kind of mentioned earlier, of Medicaid and just trying to get services in this time on top of education. There's just a lot going on. And so, I want to make sure that we're not ceding too many rights through this process. And I know all of you have everyone's best interest at heart. But like I said, I would definitely want to run traps with our folks too. So I was actually just in the process of sharing this letter with some of our folks. I think it's better to pursue this than the waiver for sure, but want to process it a little bit.
Again, Kathy KO, yeah, I appreciate that. And Leslie, you might want to chime in, but I know from visiting with some of our families, and of course our staff that are visiting with families, is a lot of folks are really confused because you're writing IEPs as though nothing has happened, meeting timelines and talking about the FAPE. And then over here we have the other kind of plan, and some of our families, they're confused and don't understand.
Yeah, and I would echo some of both of what has just been said by you, Kathy, and also by Mike, because, I can tell you that from the PTI perspective, I've received a lot of things from our national leaders, and it does, frankly, scare them a lot. I mean, when you think about the fight, if you will, from the beginning for parents to get access, just to the school building at one time, let alone general education, access. But, I think, all kids are all kids. And so I like to think of all kids being general education students and some of them having special education services that they need. And so I too would need to digest this a little bit more and kind of compare it to the kind of comments that we've been asked to sign on, from our national advocacy people in the PTI world. And frankly, we haven't signed on to anything at this point yet, because for me, I don't believe things can just be business as usual. This is not business as usual. We're all in a, a period that, everybody keeps talking about unprecedented, and it truly is. None of us have all these answers. And so to act like we can just do everything per usual does not seem realistic to me. But at the same time, I would want to really look over this letter real thoroughly. And then, like I said, compare it a little bit. I'm not a voting member. So, what the SEAC decides to do as far as signing on, I think, DRC's in that same boat as others. And I think, it would behoove us to at least put some of our perspective in the letter too, if it doesn't mesh exactly with everybody else's.
Thanks, Leslie and Mike. I really appreciate your guys' feedback. I definitely agree. Because it made me go back thinking all of the fight that people put into trying to get these services. But at the same time, I sit here and think about the reasonableness of what kind of situation we're being put into regarding the pandemic. We never planned for this. And therefore, some of the repercussions of it due to the closure to cause us more of a burden. I don't think there's anyone sitting here saying that we would want any of IDA to ever be altered in a typical school day. And so this is my stress level, because listening to everyone, I think that we would be supportive, however, also being very cautious in regards to what that would look like. But here's the deal. We're on a deadline. April 26th is the deadline. And so if that would be the case, SEAC would actually have to submit a letter by Friday. And so my question would be to the team or the committee would be, we could ask KSDE to support us and maybe facilitating and helping out write a letter with their expertise. And, they could send a draft out to us to review. But I do believe at this time, we probably would need to have a motion regarding whether we believe as a SEAC group, we should move forward with a letter. Due to timeline.
This is Kathy KO, and I would make a motion that we proceed with a letter. I'm comfortable with the executive group working on some of the details of that, but I do think we need to look at, and as the case letter and other letters have said, a temporary flexibility piece, not a waiver, and not to take things away in the long run.
Absolutely.
This is Shelley Kemper. I second that motion.
Okay, so we've had a motion from Kathy KO in regards to some flexibility, but definitely not making changes just during this time frame. And Shell seconded that. Any more discussion regarding this topic?
This is Marvin, and I just got back, so I missed some of the conversation earlier. Is there a section, because I agree with Mike and Leslie, but I also understand this is a crazy time. Is there something that we can put in there that we really believe this has to be, you know, a temporary thing and we really want to get back to, I mean, can we put some language in this letter, or is this a pre-made letter we're just signing on to?
I think that was in the motion. I
Okay.
just didn't clarify the motion very well. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely temporary.
Okay, thanks.
So if there are no more comments, we'll go ahead and move to a vote. All those in favor of SEAC working with KSDE to formulate a letter for the feds, raise your hand and so we can kind of look and get a good count. Opposed, same sign. I think everyone had their hand raised, so the motion, it passed. So I will work with Heath and get with Laura and Bert, and we got kind of a short time frame for SEAC to be able to review that letter before Friday. So you guys don't have anything truly on your plate this week, do you? Anyways, you guys are always so awesome about that. And also, if you could, you know, send any you know, if there's stakeholders out there that you believe should be represented as well, please send names or letters or any information that we can add to that letter. We definitely want the perspective from the advocacy groups. And I think that was evident from our conversation today. All right. We're just 5 minutes past schedule, but we're going to go ahead and move forward with SEAC membership 2021. All right, and I do have a list, so we are going to recognize our outgoing members. Pat, did you want me to recognize them? Bert, were you going to recognize them?
I think you could go ahead and begin that conversation, Rebecca, and then we'll all recognize them.
Okay. All right. Well, this kind of makes me sad because when I started as a SEAC member, I believe all of these members have been on the council since I started with SEAC. And so to see these members outgoing kind of makes me sad. They're a great group of advocacy and leadership, and I've grown to have a friendship with each and every one of them. And so Joan Macy, she is an outgoing member, and she actually is a past chair. Did a phenomenal job. I always remember, Joan, you had a little lollipop conversation and inspired me to try to do something similar, but I was never able to live up to your creativity. Stacy Clarkson, Stacy, that's she's a great advocate. She serves with Greenbush and has a wealth of experience for related services too. She could serve as several different members on this committee. Amy DeMall, is Amy on? I didn't see her on. Oh, there she is. She's just being quiet, staying muted. Kathy Ko. And Kathy Ko, she's taken her video off. Kathy Ko, how long have you been on SEAC? Oh, you're muted.
There we go. Okay, sorry. I was on forever and ever and ever. I was on for 6 years when I was a teacher back in the 90s. I went back on as a special ed director. Then I did vocational. And then they asked me to do juvenile justice. So I'm like the bad penny you can't get rid of.
I told Kathy, I said, you know what? I don't know how many years you have until retirement, but surely we can find you another role so you can just finish your career with SEAC as well. Megan Lambert, but I don't know, I've ever seen her on our council. She was a parent advocate. And Marvin is also a past chair. Marvin's an awesome advocate for special education and now is a special education teacher, correct? Correct?
Yes, correct.
Anyone like to share any stories about any of the members? You're like, no.
I would start with the fact that I've been very fortunate to have worked with Marvin through this time. We kind of came on and went off at different points at the same time, and I've always found him to be such a good advocate for kids and for special education. And he has done a tremendous amount of positive work on this advisory council, and I just want to thank him for his work. And he can still blame me for him being a past chair, since I was the one that nominated him before I went off the first go around. So Marvin, you're welcome.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. And I was glad I got to return the favor a couple of years ago.
Amy, if you'll move to the next slide, I would just like to say this to especially these members who are retiring from the council at this point, but you are all great to work with and I greatly appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Awesome. Well, next on the list is nominate and vote. We have a chair-elect position, as Heath will be taking the chair position next year. And so this would be a time for discussion and maybe a nomination of someone that you believe would be a great chair-elect to support Heath as he moves through next year. I visited with Jennifer King just because she's a special education leader, has a huge passion and advocacy. She's been on the council. I think she would be a great chair-elect.
So that means you're nominating her, Rebecca.
I am nominating her, but there can be several other people that, you know.
This is Kathy Ko, and I'll second the nomination.
So there has been a first and a second. Any discussion? Anyone that has a passion that's saying, "Oh no, I want to run as well," speak up. If not, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Congratulations, Jennifer. You're SEAC chair-elect.
Thanks. It'll be great, but Rebecca always gets me into things that I'm like, oh, Rebecca is always great about challenging me to reach my potential. I'll put it that way.
We would all normally clap, so yay.
I know we needed like a chair, or there needs to be like an applause in some of these. That'd be a recommendation for Zoom.
I've been cheering in the chat.
All right, I'm not sure if this was a new thing or not, but Bert is the one that mentioned this. Where is, oh, there's Bert. Bert, I'm gonna let you discuss.
Well, I think we need a motion to approve extending Rebecca Helgett for one additional year so she can serve as the past chair of SEAC. It's happened in the past because it happened to me back in the 90s. I think it's been that long ago. Where I ended up serving 8 years because I came on for someone else's term and then I was elected for 2 terms and then I served an extra year as the past chair. So I'd like for someone to make a motion that Rebecca continue for 1 more year as past chair.
This is Marvin Miller. I'll go ahead and make a motion to extend Rebecca Helgett for 1 year to serve as immediate past chair.
This is Stacy Clarkson. I'll second.
Okay, a motion.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Motion by Marvin, seconded by Stacy. All those that raising your hand already without a. All right, motion passed. We also have some first term members continuing for their second term. Laura Thompson and Shell. And I assume that they're planning on continuing to a second term. I see Shell's head shaken. Laura? Is Laura on anymore? She might have got off to teach maybe. I know I'm making an assumption, but we're brainstorming with Laura to see if she'd even be interested in being a chair as well. And she said, no way. But I do believe she does want to continue on as a member. Anything you want me to add with this, Pat?
We need a motion and second and vote just like we did for extending your term.
Okay. So a motion to extend Shell and Laura a second term.
This is Kathy Ko, and I'll make that motion.
This is Marvin Miller. I'll second that motion.
Okay, KKO made the motion, Marvin seconded. All of those in favor of extending their term, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Awesome, motion carries. And you want to explain the Google form, Pat?
Okay, there is a link to the Google form. It contains all of the positions for our outgoing members. It's really pretty simple. So just access the form and complete it. It's going to ask for names and addresses and board region of the nominee, as well as a statement of support for why this person is being nominated. What work in the field of special education or work with parenting of a child or whatever do they have experience with that makes them a good candidate to be a member of SEAC? So just a brief statement along that nature. If they are a school position person, it will ask for the name and district they are currently working in. But it's basically pretty simple, and it'll walk you straight through it as you access the link.
And Pat, I just wanted to double check on the Google form, which I'm looking at now, it lists 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 positions. Those are the open positions, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
It's gonna feel like half the council.
It is about a third this year.
All right, well, we're going to move on to council member reports. Leslie, I'll let you go ahead and begin with Families Together.
Let me unmute myself here. I don't have a lot more to add. I did just look at a report while we were talking there. I pulled up how many parent assistance calls that we have had since this began that were directly related to COVID-19 questions. And we have had about just a little under 40. And I also kind of looked quickly at the ages of the kids, and it looks like, you know, about 9 of those were 10 and under, age 10 and under. So more of them are 10 and over, you know, hearing from families that have kids over age 10. And then I also looked at urban versus rural, and it's like neck and neck. You know, literally about half and half of our calls coming from like some of the bigger districts. Wichita and Topeka are where the most of those calls are coming from. And then the rural is kind of all over the state. So just a little snapshot. I was going to keep doing a little more digging to see, you know, disability categories, those different kinds of things. But, you know, we are all working remotely. So that's, you know, been an interesting challenge, but I feel like staff has really settled in, you know, to that. Sorry, I'm getting a big echo.
I think someone can use their phone or their Zoom.
So anyway, I'm here for questions. Please, know that, please let families know that our staff continues to be available. Everybody is, working from home and, here to help in any way we can.
Awesome. Thank you, Leslie. Heath, do you have anything to add from your previous?
I think that covers it. I mean, I think we're all looking forward to, we're through the difficulty of getting started. Now we need to work on what we're doing now and what comes next, but nothing more to add. Thank you.
Okay, Mike, do you have anything with the Disability Rights Center?
Sorry, I had to get myself unmuted. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, so like others have said, we're 100% open and working. All of our folks are able to work remotely. And so that's a big blessing. The vast majority of our work, like most of you, is all COVID-19 related. Just a lot of trying to help our clients figure out how to make all this work and get through some of their immediate challenges of just, food and trying to stay safe and help. There's just a lot of confusion out there. And so even down to this economic impact payments, helping people to understand those. So, that's the vast majority of our work right now. And I think we're looking forward to getting a lot closer to the old normal and away from the new normal. But I think, thankfully all of our staff and everyone are safe. And like I said, continuing to work hard to serve our clients.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Any other council members want to add anything?
Jim McNeese, do you have anything from the state board perspective?
I have no message from the state board other than what I can say is the sentiment that they have for and support of the excellent work teachers in both regular ed and special ed have demonstrated during this time. It was very interesting to hear your challenges and some of the different things that are going well as not going well. We'll learn a lot from this. It's going to be interesting to see how we change and for the better. And I've learned a lot even in today's conversation, so thank you. And I'll be getting back with the board about the conversations we've had today. Thank you.
This is Carrie Wallace. I just want to, sorry, I had to teach class, so I came back. But as a teacher's perspective, we were saying before everybody got on, I teach a class of 22 special education students in our transitions program. And almost every day, all 22 log on. So it has made my heart warm to know that we are reaching out. We're providing still the services that we need to provide to, some families that struggled finding internet and finding places so that their students could access it. And it's been really, it's been heartwarming really to see how much our students need us and need our services, and then how successful it really has been. So as a teacher's perspective, I wanted to throw that in there.
This is Tina Gibson, and as a regular ed teacher, I would say the communication with special ed teachers has definitely increased since we've had to go to the continuous learning. So I see that as a big benefit.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing, ladies. All right. KSDE updates.
Let me get unmuted here. I'm going to get to transition in just a second, and I'm going to let Wendy and Dean and Stacy jump in here on what we're doing with transition. But a couple of updates is that we're continuing to work from home through May 3rd. It's been challenging, and that's where the Zoom rear end comes from, because I have sat in this chair. I've got 2 pillows now, because after a while, I don't have my comfy office chair. The brain can only endure as much as the seat can manage. So got to get comfortable when we're in these positions. The leadership conference in July, we plan to continue to plan for that. We don't know what type of format it will be at this point in time. We hope that it's face-to-face, but we also will be planning for a virtual opportunity if we cannot meet face-to-face. The one thing that I am concerned about is that since we have moved to this remote opportunity for families and our children, we don't want to reintegrate into society too quickly to the point to where all of a sudden the pandemic returns and it's much worse than it has been. I think we can see the success of the governor's order to order people to be at home because the cases in Kansas, I know they're increasing. We're up to 2,000 some now, but at the same time, they would have been much worse. And we all know what happens in a school setting when kids bring anything to the school. The adults get it as well as the majority of the students. So we want to make sure that we don't bring people to the July leadership face to face, and then all of a sudden people are leaving with illness within 2 to 3 weeks. So keep in mind, we're going to have July leadership. We're also still planning to have the transition conference. It's going to be on July the 27th. Heath and USD 259 in Wichita was very generous in giving us space to provide that. We hope again that it will be face-to-face, but there is the possibility that it will also have to be offered remotely or through a virtual format. We've been told by our State Department that we have no out-of-state travel permitted through June 30th. So I did want to make folks aware that the Midwest Education Leadership Conference in Breckenridge has been canceled. And that normally would have about 150 to 200 people attending. And we're sad about that, but at the same time, safety is our number one concern. The CARES Act, which is the Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Security Act, is supposed to be providing Kansas with $84,529,000. So we're still waiting to get that fund from the federal government. We've been waiting for 2 weeks. We've come up with a tentative plan, and we have offered opportunities for how much each district may receive in estimates from this act, and it's supposed to be related to this pandemic, and it can be used to support individuals with Disability Education Act initiatives. So we want folks to understand that this money is run through the Title I formula, but it is not Title I funds. It's supposed to be related to the pandemic and be able to provide whatever is needed on the part of the district or the agency as a result of this pandemic and what has resulted in the form of education we've been providing. So I want you all to be aware that that fund will be coming. We also understand that we will be taking a set aside from that, and that the state's plan at this point in time is to roll that into special education aid. And that will amount to about $8 million. So that's where we are right now as far as my update. I'm going to see if anyone else in my department would like to give an update before I turn this over to Wendy, Stacy, and Dean. So any other department person that's on this that would like to provide an update? Okay, I guess I covered it. So I'm going to see if Wendy, Stacy, and Dean can come on and provide an update on the transition implementation plan that we have.
Hi, Bert. I'm here. My name is Stacy Martin. I'm a program consultant. Wendy Coates had another conflict, so she wasn't able to join today. And I think Dean is on the call also.
Yes.
Just wanted to give you some updates on where we are. I believe last time we talked, we were planning on attending the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition Capacity Building Institute. That was supposed to be held in the first week of May. Unfortunately, that got canceled, but I was really excited. We had a really strong team that we were going to bring and had planned on doing a lot of conversations. And so we just have to kind of come back and figure out how we're going to do those conversations without going through the Capacity Building Institute. I wanted to kind of talk about the transition summit Bert had mentioned. There was a save the date that went out, gosh, over a month ago, I guess. We are currently finalizing the agenda, and another save the date with registration will go out. Our focus will be on interagency collaboration. We've already will have a working healthy representative talking about benefit specialists. So that's kind of our where we're heading as far as drawing those types of partners into that conversation and possibly a panel. So save the date on July 27th. As Bert said, we may or may not be in person, but we're forging ahead and trying to finalize that agenda. One of the things that we were able to do was to add a secondary transition link on our website under the KSD website under special education. And we are currently working on reviewing and revising resources that have been archived before. Our time frame for that completion is the first part of May. We want other partners to look at that information before that all information is posted on our website. The other thing I wanted to talk about is COVID-19 resource. There is a secondary transition resource on our website also. The Intact Resource Center has been phenomenal regarding providing supports and suggestions during this time for district teachers, anyone that find themselves in this time. So I wanted to make sure that all of you knew about those resources. That's about it. Does anyone have any questions at this time?
I might mention, Stacy, that we will be providing a quarterly report to the state board in May. So if we have our website up and running, if we have the secondary transition available, then we can provide that to the state board at that time and bring them up to speed on where we are in transition service planning for the state.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Stacy. And recognize the current chair I see is there. So we need to recognize Rebecca. It's hard to celebrate and have a cake and everything remotely. So I don't know what that would look like, but Pat, have you got anything that you'd like to share to recognize our current chair?
Yes, so Amy, if you'll go to the next slide. We want to thank you for making a difference. And the slide that I pictured here, I actually pulled from Rebecca's presentation in July when she started her leadership for the council, and just the great words of her reasoning why she wanted to be a SEAC member is she wanted to make a difference. Rebecca, you truly have.
You should be hearing applause, really loud applause right now, Rebecca, because we really thank you. Very much thank you. It's not the easiest job to have to facilitate these meetings, but you've done a great job.
Well, thanks. It's been an easy group to lead. So there's so much knowledge and experience. You make the job easy. And actually, I think that was the last thing for updates, unless you have anything else, Bert.
No, unless anybody from my team wants to come on and give an update of something that they've thought of that we forgot to bring you up to speed on. I would like to mention to the SEAC membership that if you do have any questions in between the meetings, that you can contact the chair or you can contact me or any member of my team. And as Laura had listed all of the technical assistance providers at KSDE, you have their emails. You can ask them questions. You can send a question to any of us, and we will get a response back to you because we truly are a service oriented agency, and that's what we want people to understand, is that we are here to serve the state of Kansas, and we take that role very seriously. So anything that we can do to provide support to you, just let us know.
Awesome. Thank you, Bert. Okay, Pat, have a question. Public comment is at 11:45 and we are finished early. You're muted.
We are finished early, but we did make provision. Hopefully you noticed that we were only accepting written comments this time. And I am going to just review my emails this morning just to make sure I didn't receive any. And I have not received any emails with comments this morning, so we do not have any public comment today.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, thank you guys so much. This is definitely an interesting way to lead a meeting. You guys have made it, it was collaborative, and I felt like it, I had a little bit of anxiety today going into the meeting, but I felt like it went real well. I think that we were able to facilitate some good conversation. In regards to the letter, Bert and Lauren, I'm sure KSD will be right on top of that and will be collaborating with us, and we'll get that letter out ASAP because Friday is quickly approaching. And I appreciate the conversation from all of the advocates in regards to that. And so at this time, you guys, we're done an hour early. So I know it can be painful to Zoom this long. We all have that Zoom seat, like Bert said. So unless somebody has any qualms about it, I would take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
This is Marvin Miller. Let this be my final action after 6 years. I move to adjourn the meeting.
That's a sad motion.
This is Kathy KO, and I'll second it because I'm going to have to.
Man, that almost makes me not even want, makes me want to have some conversation to keep y'all on. That's kind of a depressing motion. All those in favor, raise your hand. Opposed, I don't think there will be any, but same sign. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys. It's been a great time being together.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Pat, so much for organizing this. I know it was probably.
Thanks, Pat.
You're very welcome. And thanks to Amy for keeping our PowerPoint going for us this morning. I couldn't do it all without her.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.